details, or is this horse riding?
Good evening, and welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for March 18th, 2025. We have two items of business before I open the meeting to the public. The first item is I have a request. I would like someone to make a motion to close the non-public session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The second motion that I need is to seal the minutes of the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then, in that case, we are in order. Please note that all applicants have 15 minutes to present their application. If you think you're going to need more, ask us before you go up there, and we will vote whether to allow that. If you're speaking to, for, or against, about 5 minutes, please. All right. So I would like to take item 3 out of order for postponement. I need a vote to take out of order.
3A, do you need to read it?
I'm sorry.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I am
you are recused
recused
from
on
this
this, thank
vote,
you.
right.
So I will not be participating in this discussion.
Excuse me. The request to postpone is for Harborside Property Management LLC owner for property located at 92 Brewster Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing structure and construct a single-family home with accessory dwelling unit, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow A, 2,884 square feet of lot area where 3,500 square feet are required. B, 2,884 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit where 3,500 square feet are required. C, 52.33 feet of continuous street frontage where 70 feet are required. D, 9.5-foot right side yard where 10 feet are required. And E, 10-foot rear yard where 20 feet are required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 138, Lot 54, and lies within the General Residence C GRC District. So there is a request to postpone. Yes.
Madam Chair, I
Mr.
make a motion to postpone the request to the date in the future, because we don't want to go
For June. They have a request for the June meeting.
then the June meeting.
Okay. Is there a second?
The stipulation? Didn't we have to, we're not taking this out of order, and this is in proper order? I thought you'd called for a motion to
I did.
take this out of order.
And then we got onto this motion. Okay, we need a motion to take it out of order first.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now,
Motion to postpone till the June meeting.
Second.
okay. Any discussion?
There was a stipulation about the applicant adding a consideration that the applicant will be re-advertised, the application will be re-advertised at the expense of the applicant.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Do you want to tell us why?
He's made a request for postponement, which we, because of a personal matter, he's let us know. I think it's a reasonable request to postpone.
Okay. Then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nobody. All right. We are now ready for the approval of the minutes of the February 19th, 2025 site walk minutes.
Oh.
Mr. Mattson, no, you're.
Oh, sorry, yeah, the other minutes.
Mr. Ram,
Madam Chair, just for the record also, I was recused on that case, and as indicated in those sidewalk minutes, did not participate in that, so I will not be voting
okay,
on this.
thank you.
I make a motion to approve the site walk minutes as
Okay.
presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, any changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I am also not voting because I was not there that evening.
Same.
Okay.
Abstain.
Okay.
Okay.
The second thing I need is an approval for the February 19th, 2025 meeting minutes. Mr. Mattson?
Yeah, I just have one minor change. It's page 10 of our packet, page 7 of those minutes. The third sentence it says, and he also, though that allowing a duplex, and it should say, and he also thought that allowing a duplex.
Okay. Yes.
I have two suggested changes on that same page. I think it's line 11 under timestamp 4328, so the same paragraph Mr. Mattson was talking about. Line 11 has a sentence that said, Mr. Neese said the history of the zoning in that area was troublesome and that it wasn't the board's job. I think it reads better if that word and is changed to but, that it wasn't the board's job to resolve zoning problems. And then moving down, I think it's line 18, that same page in that same section. It starts with that the board had multiple versions of the project. I think it reads better if it says either had the board had seen multiple versions of the project, just to avoid the had, because I find that awkward.
Does the maker of the motion accept these?
I don't think we've got a
Yeah,
motion.
actually, I didn't make a motion,
You
but
didn't
I will
them.
make a
Okay,
motion
I thought that
to.
came with your motion.
Yeah, I will make a motion to accept the minutes
right.
as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion, changes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain? All right. So, the next item of business is old business. A, rehearing for the request of PNF Trust of 2013 owner for property located at 84 Pleasant Street and 266, 270, 278 State Street, originally heard on November 19th, 2024. The project requested relief to merge the lots and construct a 4-story mixed-use building. As voted on at the February 19th, 2025 meeting, the request for variance 2B will be the only relief considered in the rehearing. For a 4th-story addition at 50 feet in height to the Church Street elevation, where 3 full stories and a short 4th are allowed with 45 feet maximum height permitted. Said property is located on Assessor Map, Lot Map 107, Lot 77, Map 107, Lot 78, Map 107, Lot 79, Map 107, Lot 80, and lies within the Character District 4, Historic and Downtown Overlay Districts. So is there anyone to speak to this?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Chris Mulligan from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts, on behalf of the applicant, PNF Trust of 2013. I'm hoping your IT staff can confirm that Michael Keene, the project architect, is with us via Zoom.
Yes, I do see him there.
Great. Thank you very much. You're all very well aware of this project. It's been before this board in some iteration, I think at least 4 times. The project as a whole is a proposal to combine these 4 lots and redevelop it into a mixed-use building with commercial and residential uses. The applicant received approvals of a very similar project back in 2020. You all know the history here. The building at State Street, housing the State Street Saloon, was the subject of a fire in 2017. Pre-fire, there were 17 residential units spread amongst the properties that comprise this combined development without any parking. What we've proposed would be a development with a replacement of 17 units with the addition of 17 off-street parking spaces. You provided us in November with several different species of relief having to do with certain design details. Height relief is what we're here for tonight, specifically the height on the portion of the property that has frontage on Church Street. This is the property at 84 Pleasant Street, the locally known as the Louis Building. It's got a historic townhome facing Pleasant Street, and then a large addition to the rear. What we're proposing is to create a development that recreates the height and scale of the former Times Building, which was the cornerstone on the corner of Church and State Street. And because of the sort of unique elements of that particular building, that building is higher than would be permitted under the zoning ordinance today. But the goal is to sync up the story heights in the adjoining and adjacent lots, and the buildings to be constructed on the adjacent lots so they sync up with what will be built to replace the Times Building at its unique height and elevation. This is the result of a number of sessions that we had with the Historic District Commission, which expressed their strong desire that we recreate or create a structure that evokes the Times Building. What we've proposed on the Church Street elevation that is before you this evening is a three-story building with a full fourth story stepped back from the outer perimeter of the building. In order to do that and to properly sync the stories up with the building that will be replacing the Times Building, we're requesting relief not only for the full fourth story, but for additional height. Under the ordinance, we would be entitled to 45 feet of height. We're requesting an additional 5. And we'd be entitled to a short fourth story if we employed a mansard roof design element. That is another issue that has come up in work sessions that we've had with the HDC. They are strongly opposed to us moving forward with a mansard roof. Our feeling is that, and I think this is reflected by the wishes of the Historic District Commission, that a mansard roof is not appropriate for this particular location. The design that we've proposed actually is more beneficial. It will have the less appearance of mass and height than the mansard roof, which would have to come out all the way to the outer perimeter of that portion of the building. And the mansard roof also creates some challenges in terms of runoff that we can alleviate with the design that we're proposing. So both aesthetically and technically, this is a better design that we're proposing. The height that we are proposing, again, it's 50 feet where we would otherwise be entitled to 45. We're stepping it back from the outer perimeter of that portion of the building, so it will be stepped back from Church Street, and it will be stepped back from the working stiff property line. It's, I think, important to note the sort of characteristics of the general vicinity. Obviously, you have a very massive structure right across Church Street in the South Church. You've got the Custom House building across State Street. You've got what will be, hopefully, the recreated Times Building, which is a substantial building. And in the vicinity, you've also got The Firehouse, the Griffin Apartments, and the Feaster Apartments a little further down Court Street. So it is not at all unusual for large, substantial buildings in this particular vicinity. And this particular property, the corner of State, Pleasant, and Church Street is essentially a cornerstone location within Portsmouth that is really calls out for a very substantial development and what we believe is a building that, while it's larger than is permitted by right under zoning, fits into its environment and is more desirable than what we can build by right. So that is sort of the general overview. As you know, this was before the board back in November. The board granted variances for everything that we had requested, but for the proposed penthouse. The plans that we've submitted after a couple of intervening work sessions with the HDC, as you can see, remove the penthouse. But other than that, it with minimal design changes, it's essentially what was before you when we were here in November. One thing that was raised in November by the Working Stiff folks was there was, on one of the elevations, there were windows that faced a property line. We've removed those. They were correct that those would not be code compliant. So that objection, I think, has been met. Basically, what we have is a project that I think you've all had plenty of time to consider and previously considered and, for the most part, approved. So with that, I'll just get into the variance criteria, and if you have any questions, either I or Michael Keene hopefully can answer them for you.
Questions now?
Okay. So granting the variances will not, or excuse me, in this case it's granting the variance, will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, nor will it be contrary to the public interest. Here you have to consider whether or not, if you grant the variance, there will be an essential change in the characteristics of the neighborhood, or if health, safety, and welfare of the public be threatened. The character of the neighborhood as a dense, mixed urban environment will not be changed by the addition of height to this particular portion of the project. The project, as I stated, is within the vicinity of several very large buildings. Again, South Church, Custom House, Firehouse, the Portsmouth Housing Authority buildings nearby. So the scale and mass of the building is not out of place with its environment. This will be brand new code compliant construction. Health, safety, and welfare will be enhanced by this project. We'll be introducing off-street parking for the benefit of the residential units at the development where there previously was none. Again, this is a benefit and will enhance health, safety, and welfare. Substantial justice would be done by granting the variance. Variances, here you have the balancing test, whether or not the loss to the applicant, if the variances are denied, is outweighed by some gain to the general public if the board requires strict compliance with the ordinance. Here, if we lose the additional height and the additional story, there would be a severe loss to the applicant. Our ability to site the off-street parking, which is underground off-street parking that's accessed through the Church Street elevation, the Church Street entrance, would be almost totally compromised. So we would lose the off-street parking. Our ability to sync up the story heights with the reconstructed Times building, or the replacement of the Times building, would be compromised. We would be stuck with a situation where we would have floor levels that don't sync together, and we would have elevators stopping at staggered intervals. It would create quite a technical challenge, and frankly would bring the feasibility of the entire project into question. So the loss to the applicant, if the variances are denied, is not outweighed by any gain to the public if you were to require strict compliance. Values of surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variances. Again, the variances have to do with height. We're entitled to 3 stories plus a short fourth. We're asking essentially for 5 additional feet of height for a full 4th story, although the program, as you can see in the renderings, is to step back the 4th story, which is a better design than what we're entitled to by right, in our opinion, and frankly in the opinion of your historic district commissioners. So we will have a substantial investment in this property. Millions of dollars will be spent on a brand new showpiece of a building that will enhance property values throughout the neighborhood. Then finally, special conditions. So the unnecessary hardship criteria here, there's special conditions associated with this property that prevent its full enjoyment under strict terms of the zoning ordinance that thus constitutes an unnecessary hardship. The overarching goal of the development is to recreate the height and scale of the Times building. That was the clear direction that we received from the historic district. In order to do that, we need to effectively integrate the surrounding building lots and buildings themselves in such a way that we can link up with the floor heights that exist at the Times building. So there are special conditions associated with this property that are somewhat unique. It's 4 lots that will be merged. It's in close proximity to a number of very large, substantial buildings. Again, South Church, Custom House, the other buildings on Court Street that I've discussed. We're entitled by right to a short 4th story with a mansard roof, but again, that's a far inferior design. So these are special conditions of this property that are unique to this property and are separated from other properties in the vicinity. The use that we're proposing is a reasonable use, mixed residential commercial. It's permitted by right, and all of the abutting and adjacent properties other than the church have something very similar in terms of the use. So the use is reasonable. And so there is no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance and its application to this property. The buildings that I've discussed that have existed within the neighborhood that exceed current height and that are current height regulations and that have significant substantial massing, as this building will, have not had any negative effects on the neighborhood. So the purpose of the height requirements and its application to this project, I don't see what the relationship is. We've got essentially a cornerstone project or cornerstone property in with a project that requires us to exceed the allowable heights under the ordinance as it's written now, and to replicate a historic building that has been lost. And in order to do that, we need additional height, and we hope that you will agree that the variances that we're requesting are reasonable under the circumstances.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Mr. Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, looking back on the November application, there are some changes, as you've already noted. The penthouse over the new Floros building portion is missing. There's not as much detail in the current application as there was back in November, so I just want to understand, looking at our page 30 of our packet, during the November application, there was a pretty significant addition over, we'll call it the Louis building, that was housing a number of, looked like a air conditioning condenser farm of some sort. That appears from this illustration to have been reduced in height. Is that correct? Because originally that seemed much taller, aligned more with the top of the third story of the Church Street structure.
I believe that is correct, but I'm going to ask Michael Keene to weigh in on that, if he can.
Hello?
Hello? You're on.
Hi. Yes, Michael Keene Architects in Newmarket. And yes, that is correct. We went back and restudied the mechanical platform that was there, and we are able to drop that down to where we had originally shown it back 4 or 5 years ago in our original plan. It got lifted as the building came up, but when we went back and looked at the section through the townhouse, we realized we could bring that back down to its original elevation.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of the new fourth story that you're proposing, we'll call it like the pale yellow color that's shown on this. The total, as you kind of indicated, I just want to make it crystal clear, the total square footage of that is unchanged from the November application. It's no larger, no smaller. And then its distance from the adjacent property line of the next door neighbor is also unchanged, and it's essentially pretty close to that property line. Is that correct?
The footprint of that floor plan did not change, of the building, well, either the roof deck or the enclosed part. Nothing changed there. We are 0 lot line, so we have no setback on the interior lot line. However, we were able to keep the wall, if you look at the Church Street elevation, that adjoining wall, we are able to keep at 45 feet to be able to provide our guardrails and our lower stair unit. So right along the property line, we're at 45 feet in height. Towards the back of the building, we set back 4 feet to where we then add the full second story there. But that's only for the rear portion of that elevation. The rest of that, forward of that is 9 foot setback, and then of course forward of that for the 10.5 feet from Church Street to that outside wall, there's nothing but roof deck all the way back to the Times building, if I explained that clearly.
Okay, thank you. And then, in terms of the Times building and the relief that's being asked for tonight with the 5B, do you feel that the Times building is already been covered by other relief, or is that something that most of your narrative is focused on this? I'll call it the Church Street building, but the replica Times building, is this relief necessary for any of your ability to construct that portion of the project?
Well, it's a good question, and I think because we're only talking about the Church Street elevation, that the answer is no, it's not. However, I would point out that your staff report on page 7 suggests that the board should consider that the height of the Times building was presented at 53 feet existing, and the proposed November 19th, 2024 BOA decision and the new decision, if the intention is to reaffirm the height of the building variance. I think it would be, I think that's a good suggestion, and I think it would be wise for the board to take the staff's suggestion and reaffirm the height at 53 for the Times portion, the recreated Times building portion.
Okay,
That answers the question.
thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions?
Any other questions? Yes.
So following up on that, the Church Street elevation side, and this is BOA .5. So the Browner building, not the Times building, the other building, that's the current cinder block building?
Well, that would be replacing the current cinder block building, yeah.
Okay, because the application says that some portion of, that there would be some portion of some building that would be demolished, and I can't think of where that would be. I think everything's been demolished, right?
No,
Cinder block.
the cinder block building is still there.
But you're going to demolish the cinder block building?
That's correct.
Okay. And so your relief is for this new building, that this is, you want 4 stories and 50 feet, because the HDC does not want a mansard roof on this particular building.
Yeah, that's yes.
Okay. And then the sort of part of the structure that's pale yellow, that's a townhouse?
That's
It is a residential unit, but that's the stepped back portion of the fourth story that we're talking about.
so that is the fourth story that we're seeking relief
The fourth
for.
story that you're seeking. How necessary is that to harmonize with with the recreation of the Times building?
I think we, in order to have the 17 units, we need that additional story. And our goal is to recreate the number of units that previously existed. So we are, we are attempting to sync up to the, or we're planning to sync up to the story heights as exist on the Times building and get the same number of units as previously existed.
And that structure is part of the new cinder block. It has no relation to the Times building.
Yeah, I believe that is correct. That's an accurate statement.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Neese.
So I wonder if you could elaborate on something for me. If I look at the State Street elevation, which I realize is not before us really today, but it looks to me like the State Street elevation has 4 stories, or perhaps it's 3 with a short 4th story with a mansard roof, with the floors lined up with the Times building. That's what that appears to be there to me, anyway. And yet you say that the HDC doesn't want a mansard roof on Church Street, which is far less visible to the public than the State Street elevation. Is there an explanation why they're comfortable with the mansard roof on State Street, but not with a mansard roof on Church Street?
I believe it's because I'm not a design professional, and I don't mean to be putting words in commissioners' mouths. However, the way it's been expressed to me and what I understand is it's the fact that that portion of the roof is facing the South Church. They do not want to see a mansard roof that in that proximity to a historic structure like that. And Michael might have a better, insight than I do to that, but that's my understanding, is that it's due to its proximity to the South Church. And Michael, if you've
I
got
don't
anything
know-
to add.
Yeah. I don't know that we've had a specific in-depth discussion about it, but from what I recall in our various work sessions, the feeling is that State Street and Pleasant Street, being much wider streets, are able to handle the mass of the building more so than Church Street, which is a narrower street and has more of a pedestrian scale to it. So their goal was to try to keep the elevation of the building down along that street front line, basically because of the width of the street and the pedestrian scale was one of the reasons. I think the other reason was sort of the overuse of mansard in this proximity of this block, sort of redeveloping this block with too many mansards just to satisfy the zoning ordinance. We had back 4 years ago, I think, when we were first before them, we had presented them with both options, and we came out of that work session with a clear understanding that the preference was for the step back versus the mansard, and we have revisited that in our last 2 work sessions and confirmed that that is still their feeling. That their preference is to have the step back stories there rather than mansard.
Thank you. Anything further? Yes.
You mentioned the 17 units you're trying to recreate in the building. Is the configuration the same as the 17 units prior to the fire?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would be extremely skeptical that that's even possible. So the answer is almost certainly no. A good portion of at least one of the. Okay.
Misunderstanding me.
Yeah.
Configured as 17 units, how many are 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms? And is that the same that was there before?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just got reminded of a question from Beth Bargerson's comment. So where that setback 4th story meets the Times building, it's connected, but it's a firewall, so there's no passing through. Is that how you would characterize that?
Where it meets the Times building.
Yeah, so it would be so for example, from the Church Street elevation, where the Times building, so on the top story for this, the Times building meets the yellowish setback portion, and it seems important to the applicant that those stories line up.
Yep.
Is there any passing through where those 2 structures meet, or is it isolated?
I would have to take a quick look at the floor
I
plan.
can answer that, Chris.
Michael can answer that. Thank you.
Yes, the floor plans do connect back there to the back side of that yellow portion. There is a door that connects the 2 of them and a corridor that goes across the back. All of these properties will basically share the same infrastructure in terms of egress stairs and elevator access. So that's one of the reasons we really, aside from a structural reason, to have the floors line up to be able to provide an accessible route from the entrance to the building and the parking areas to each of the units, which is required by the building code to have an accessible route. It's desired to have those floor lines line up to avoid having to have multiple elevators or multiple stops on the elevators.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, page 131 of our November 19th package, if you take a look at that, that has all the floor plans.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Yes, please, Mr. Rossi.
Just want to reorient myself versus the November 19th discussion that we had. The yellow step back portion of the structure, is that where the, in the original November 19th plan, was it that location where the penthouse was originally envisioned?
No.
No, that was totally.
The penthouse, I believe, if I recall correctly, would have been over the mansard roof on the State Street
Okay.
elevation.
Okay, and then that, because that height relief request was much greater, wasn't it? It was
I think it was 55 or
55 or something
57.
like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is less than the height relief
Yeah.
that was requested and denied in
Yeah.
November.
And if you bring up a point that I want to mention, I remember in November you had asked if this was going to be taller than the South Church, and I
Right.
believe I misspoke. It is actually not as tall as the South Church.
Okay, well, thank you, but I thought that's what you said before, so that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, good.
Yeah, that's correct.
Any other questions?
Okay, that's where that was.
Okay. No? All right. Thank you. We'll
Thank you.
open it to the public. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this petition?
Simple question.
Come up to the microphone, please. And tell us your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Doug Green. I live in Kittery Point. I'm here representing South Church.
Okay.
I chair the Planning and Implementation Committee. We do large capital projects. Put the new roof on the South Church a couple years ago. Simple question. This setback, what are the dimensions on that? In other words, how far is it set back from the edge of the building in both, on each side? Can we get an answer to that?
Is that germane for what we're looking at tonight?
I think it's very important to us in terms
They don't
of
have setbacks.
the effect
There are
of
no
that roof line.
setbacks. It is on the lot line. Is that what you're asking me?
No,
Or
the
are you
ye-
asking me how far is the building on top set back?
The yellow
yellow
part
building.
on the tippy top, yep. How
Okay,
far is
I
that set
think
back from,
that's
thank you.
Okay. Yes,
Would you like me to answer that, Ms. Madam
yes,
Chair?
please.
At its closest point, it's 10 foot 6 back from the Church Street property line to the,
Okay,
to that yellow portion, at its closest point. Oh, I'm sorry, and
Can't
the
talk to you
interior
from
lot
there.
line,
Come to the
the
microphone.
interior lot line is, on the interior lot line, as I said, we're at 45 feet. And then we set in 4 feet before we go up to the 50 on the back portion of the building. And we're set in 9 feet in the sort of the middle section of the building before we step up to the 50 feet.
no, sorry, you
Gotta come to
need
the
to
mic.
come to the microphone so that we have this on the record.
Complicated question.
It doesn't matter, we have to hear it.
Okay, sorry. The dimension from, on the Court Street side, from the end of the the end of the yellow, no, that's the wrong elevation, but that's okay.
How far is the yellow building in from the Court Street side?
Thank you,
Yes?
thank you.
If we're looking at this elevation, the red portion of the building that you're seeing there, the height is 45 feet, and that's right on the property line. If you look at the yellow portion of the building where the 4 windows are, that setback is 4 feet from the interior property line. And if you look at the section where the 2 windows are, that is 9 feet back from the interior lot line.
Do you understand that? Anybody here?
If you want to talk to us, you need to come here and do it into the.
Sorry.
mic. I think the question basically is how far is the yellow building set back from Court Street?
From the edge of the brown
From the edge
building,
of the brown building, okay.
on the Court Street side.
I know.
I think
The
the
yellow
architect,
portion where the 4 windows are is set back 4 feet. Where the 2 windows are is set back 9 feet.
thank you.
Okay. Anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition to this petition?
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. I'm Scott Hogan. I've been a land use attorney here in New Hampshire for 30 years, most of them in the Seacoast. I'm now out of Lyndeborough. So I'm here representing the folks at Working Stiff Properties next door who filed the motion for rehearing. So the board granted that. We're only here talking about 2B. So the point I wanted to make here is when the board granted the motion for rehearing, and it was clear that it was only on 2B. And if I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to just speak for a few minutes. My clients would also like to address the board on the specifics about how this relates to their own property.
If it has to do with the height, we'll hear
It
it.
sure does. It's exactly on that point. And on that specific point, there were two issues I think that the board saw in the motion for rehearing, and here we are because it was granted. One of them was when the board was considering the various requests for relief, there was discussion of a number of them together. And one of the issues that was raised in the motion for rehearing was that the specific deliberations on the 2B issues, how it met each of the 5 separate variance requirements, wasn't articulated separately, and that was one of the issues. But really, the reason why my clients would like to speak directly to the board, the other issue in the board's original approval before the motion was filed, it was stated there, quote, "The penthouse on the Church Street side isn't objectionable and will not diminish the values of surrounding properties." And there's a concern from one of the abutters, those are my
Sorry,
clients.
I don't see how this has to do with the building. The penthouse is gone.
It goes directly to the 5 requirements, and again, the applicant here has the burden, right, on each of the 5 separate variance requirements to meet their burden. And one of them is it will not diminish the value of surrounding properties, et cetera. So
We're
the
not
height
going-
issues, if I may,
Go ahead.
Madam
For a little
Chair.
while. Go ahead.
the height issue particularly on, and that's what we're talking about. It's the only thing we're talking about on the 2B issue tonight. The board stated there's concern from one of the abutters, but it is the downtown area and the space taken up is slightly larger than what is called for. None of the relief being asked for are things that would affect the abutter. So that's the point of disagreement. So my clients would like to say specifically how literally the difference in height affects them. The air, the space, those are valuable commodities in Portsmouth. So we've seen how the city changes. We've seen the large buildings. We've heard the discussion tonight. So they'd like to speak to those.
And they can, yes.
Thank you. And on that, the cost, if you will, of light, space, air are particular issues the board has to make. So after we all speak to you all tonight, you all deliberate and you have to make a 2B decision on each of the 5 requirements. So there's a clear record for
Yes,
each party.
always.
So in that, right, what we just heard, and it did catch my attention that in the discussion we just heard from Attorney Mulligan, there were questions from the board about, is this necessary? And the answer was no, it's not necessary. But they want the 17 units, they want the business plan that they have. They're talking about what the HDC kind of said they wanted. None of those are the basis for variance relief. These issues of heights and building mass are so essential to the way that Portsmouth has been building out for the last years that that's really properly for a zoning amendment, not for the zoning board itself one at a time to make these kinds of fundamental policy decisions. And the applicant has, in essence, said that they can comply. But if they comply, their plan is better than complying, is what we've heard. Those don't go to the legal requirements that they have to meet to show the burden on each of the 5 variance requirements. So if I'm gonna stop talking, I'd like you to just hear quickly from my clients about how they are affected by this. And then, if I may, after that, just have perhaps 5 minutes to wrap up on the variance requirements. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Hi, I'm Barbara Jenny. I'm one of the members of Working Stiff Properties. I'll speak first, and then my partner, my husband, will speak. First, for the record, I'd like to say that we submitted an application for the request for rehearing for 2B, and even though we were the applicant and we did pay the fee of over $400, we are not clearly on the agenda to present, and none of our images are here. So I want to, for the record, for the board and also for anybody watching or present, that if you go to the February 19th ZBA meeting in the archive, linked there is our application with the images that we provided, and those images do accurately, in proportion, show the photoshopped height of the wall. It also shows existing conditions with the dormers on our third floor of the building, which the applicant for the project neglected to include in all of their drawings, and still to date, they leave those out. They have included them in one elevation on the Pleasant Street side, but they do not include our 3 dormers on the Court Street side.
You could
So I
have
would like to-
submitted those had you want to.
So the public can find those there. And again, we paid over $400 for this rehearing, and yet we do not get the formal ability to present. We are just here presenting now as part of the public hearing. So I would like to make that point. I also would like to say, to remind the board that the city was quite eager for the removal of what you may remember was the whale wall, a very tall brick wall without windows, and yet what you had allowed previously was essentially a new, large, massive brick wall right next to, behind our historic townhouse, and Attorney Mulligan referred to the fact that they are historic townhouses. We do appreciate that they have pulled that portion back that was cantilevered over the ridge line. I'm not sure that that was noticed initially, but we do appreciate that they pulled that back. However, the height still remains. And if you are in that dormer, and if you could scroll and if you could rotate, that would be great. You can see that our dormer is going to be right up against that wall, and my husband will speak to some details about that. I also would like to say that in the height, and I think some of the questions that you asked were alluding to that, this quote-unquote necessary height to line up with the Times building floors, that was an argument with the existing Times building. You will note that that has been demolished. So all those pieces are new. They can make those floors as whatever height they want to line up. And again, that penthouse, and it is a penthouse, that yellow portion, is a distinct unit. Although it has a door for emergency, it is a distinct unit. If it's not there, it does not need an emergency door into the Times building. So I'd like to note that. And I'll let my husband speak now. Thank you.
Okay. Wait, excuse me. Could you come back? There's a question for you.
Thank you. What is the height of the dormers that you're referencing?
My husband is a builder, and he'll know that. Answer.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Matthew Beebe. I'm also a member of Working Stiff Properties and a builder, as my wife said. And also, we are responsible for that complete historic renovation that's occurred to the other half of that historic townhouse. So we do have a vested interest in making sure that what goes up next to us has not just some appeal, but doesn't diminish the quality of the work that's been provided to date. So the single-story piece in the back, in case anyone is wondering why that still looks the way it does, we have been waiting very patiently to see what happens with this proposal from Mr. Flores' group. And so we have not done any renovation or restoration to any portion of that, because we certainly didn't want to do that if something was going to happen during the construction of the Flores project, collapsing walls, any of the number of things that could happen. And I also want to make the point that Barbara and I have always been in favor of this block being redeveloped. it's for 7 years now, we've been waiting to get a proposal this close to approval so that something could happen there, which has affected our tenants, affected our rents, affected the neighborhood. It's affected the view of people coming into the city. So we realize it's a very important piece of architecture. And of course, we are not arguing any of the other aspects of this other than the height that was approved, 5 feet beyond what's allowed by the ordinance up against our building. Now, I brought a tape measure, but I need to stand next to the lectern here, so I can't move. But
You can take a mic with you.
does anyone know the height of the ceiling in this room? Would you say that that's between 18 and 20 feet? Because that's what I would guess. That's the proposed difference in height from that CMU wall that's over that single-story piece at the backside of our parking lot. That's the proposed difference in height. Now, granted, there is a step back that Mr. Flores' architect has provided, but we're talking about a difference of that screen in front of us that we're looking at is probably about 6 feet wide. That's larger than the space between the side of our dormer and that wall that's going to go up next to it, over 13 feet. It's 32 and a half feet right now, the wall that's existing. Their proposal is for 50 feet. It's almost another 18 feet. Step back is included in that. But that's still at the height that Photoshop has shown, that is accurate to the height of what's been put into the proposal. Now, it's very curious to me that even after speaking a number of times about this, that the architect never bothered to put the dormers on this side of the building. I do CAD building design as well as build. It takes about 5 minutes to mirror image a dormer from the Pleasant Street side on this building to the Court Street side on the back. And if you go to BOA 5, when you can get to it.
To go back and forth.
Nobody wants to see an elevation of me. Well, there's a good indication. So I can't see the scale on the drawing, but I'm guessing that the distance between the end of the Church Street addition in brick to the edge of the drawing is in excess of 6 feet. So it's appropriate, it's inappropriate, but it's not unexpected that the architect is not going to show the dormer on that roof because of its proximity to that wall and the additional height. You can see there's a gray line there, horizontal line above that second-story window. That's approximately the height of the roof now that exists. And right. Okay. Now on BOA 6, you can see there's a dormer on the Pleasant Street side. How hard would it have been to mirror image that to the other side so that you get a real indication of how close that wall is to the windows in that unit? So these are residential units at that height that will no longer have any access to, especially that dormer. You'll never get sun coming in through that window anymore between the height of the church across the street and the building going up another 13 feet right next to it.
Excuse me, may I ask you a question? Currently, the allowed height, the approved height is 45 feet.
Correct.
At that height, is there a meaningful difference for you just between those two?
Absolutely.
I'd like you here to speak to that.
Right. And that additional 5 feet is what they're using to get that yellow penthouse on top of that section, because that's what that is. So if they want to redesign...
It's not a penthouse at all by the definitions of the city.
Right,
but-
well, it's essentially the same sort of structure that the board turned down in 2A of the applicant's effort back in November. And if we had applied the same criteria that was
No,
applied then, now they're talking about demolishing this
Excuse me,
entire...
I'm going to stop you because you've gone past your 5, and I believe we have a question for you.
Okay.
My question is really related to the root of the chair's question. What is the height of the dormers that you are concerned about?
Well,
Dormers, not their building, your
no,
dormers.
I'm looking at it right here. It's about half of the distance of the roof. I'm going to say that it's about, because the ceiling heights are low in that third floor, that's about 7 feet from the floor to the eave of the roof.
So what is the height? Can you just give me a number, please? What is the height?
Just
of
say
those?
7 feet.
The dormers can't be 7 feet
is the
off
height of the
off the
dormers?
ground.
From the ground.
I don't have that dimension off the top of my head. But the building is,
What's the height of the roof, then?
the roof is about 42 feet to the ridge.
Thank you.
No, it can't be that much.
No, it
because
can't.
Yeah.
It can't be. I'm seeing it behind this building. All right, you have used your 5 minutes. I'm going to call again to see if there's anyone else who would like to speak to this. And there is somebody online, so I'm going to ask you to hold.
Verity Boyer.
Good evening. My name is Verity Boyer, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Portsmouth Advocates, the preservation arm of the Portsmouth Historical Society. The Times building has long been an important part of Portsmouth cultural landscape, and while the demolition of it last fall was regrettable, the proposed reconstruction by the PNF Trust, developed in close collaboration with the Historic District Commission, offers a way to honor and preserve the building's legacy while supporting growth and change in our city. We ask that you advocate for the Lost Time building today by granting the requested variance of 50 feet and 4 stories, allowing for its reconstruction and continued legacy. Our sincere hope is that this project will set a precedent and serve a lasting testament to the power of collaboration, preservation, and an unwavering commitment to both Portsmouth's past and future. Thank you.
Thank you. 2, 4, or against?
Thank you. The thing I wanted to reiterate after you heard directly from my folks was when you look at the grounds that were put forward in the motion for rehearing itself, again, just as to the 2B issues. So my clients laid out in that motion each of the 5 variance requirements. Applicant did not prove hardship. And on that point, I meant to mention earlier in the original discussion with Attorney Mulligan, when he was asked about special conditions of the property. And again, what are special conditions of the property that distinguish it from those of others? And the answer was, what are the special conditions? It's, our goal is to recreate the Times building. We want 17 units. We need to integrate the lots and the buildings to link up. That's not any special condition that's ever, in my experience, been recognized as a basis for a finding on that variance requirement. No, it's not necessary. Second question, how necessary is it? It's necessary to have 17 units. Special conditions are we want to recreate the Times building. When the board was considering that, and again on the 2A issue back in the day on the special conditions, the board denied 2A back based on the lack of hardship as noted in the findings, fails the hardship criteria as there are no special conditions of the property that drive the need. So too many mansards, that's not the basis for a variance. Again, that goes to something that ought to be considered as a zoning amendment proper, that the city discusses, not the zoning board giving them one at a time. They have a desire to have the floors line up. Again, the desires, the business plan, those aren't what drive the applicant meeting their burden on each of the 5 requirements. So I would just suggest and say that all of the issues that were raised in the motion for rehearing, I'm not going to go into them now and take the time. I know you've all read them. I'll state that they're incorporated by reference into the arguments we're making right now, because as they specifically apply only to 2B now. So in that respect, I appreciate the board's time, the chair's time. And again, I hope we can all go away tonight with a specifically clear deliberation on each of the 5 variance requirements for 2B, and off we go from there. I'd be happy to answer any questions, comments, suggestions.
Yes, we're good for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Last call. 2 for or against. Okay.
I just want to see if somebody.
The public hearing is closed. So, back to us yet again. What would you like to do? Yes, Ms.
We'll
Marchese.
start if nobody else is going to start. I'm glad that we voted to rehear this because I have to say that my original vote was predicated on, mistakenly, that the fourth story was needed more for the Times, recreation of the Times building. I don't see, I have to say, I'm not really, I will defer, of course, to the Historic District Commission, but as to the mansard roof issue, but the building, the recreation, not of the Times building, but the other buildings, those were buildings that didn't have mansard roofs originally. And the new construction will have mansard roofs, and the feeling is that you can't have a mansard roof on the Church Street elevation out of deference to the church. I don't know if I see that. I think I also am not really sure that they need that fourth story. I don't think it's necessary for the recreation of the Times building. I guess I'm just struggling with what the real hardship is there. Those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few comments. I guess to start with, I would make some comments related to Chair Marginson, or Vice Chair Marginson's comments. So I guess the logic that I've been following is, well, specifically for the mansard roof, I agree by itself it wouldn't necessarily be adequate just because they have another mansard roof. But I do strongly buy the concept that if you're walking down a narrower passageway, if a building, if the top floor is set back, that feels a lot less imposing than any roof that comes up to the property line. And then I guess I've been struggling with this, but I kind of have walked through the sequence of events that to make sense to me is that I guess for one, I would start that to me essentially the recreation of the Times building is undoubtedly a special characteristic, special condition of this property. I mean, that's specifically unique because it's a unique building. So if you're recreating that building, which I think it's a very admirable thing to be doing, and the Historic District Commission has had a lot of input on this, and so once you've got the Times building, that does set a lot of things, particularly story heights, and as mentioned, the exits on the elevators and the stairs with their landings and all that egress. So again, I guess you could say they don't need that fourth setback portion behind the Times, attached to the Times building, but we're often not making decisions based on what an applicant needs, and I believe that's even some case law that says it's not just purely based on an absolute need. It's just whether or not it's reasonable, and if it has special conditions where we can adapt the zoning ordinance as it is for these unique properties. So I guess, in my opinion, I can see the logic of while they don't need this fourth story, it is a way to keep 17 units, which is identical to what was there before in terms of number of units. And then I guess just one other thought I had was to start with, I would say the working stiff building property is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, that's a well done building. I guess my only thing is, from my view, this project would actually complement it in terms of refilling out this block. And to me, the biggest potential issue to block light from the dormers of that lovely building, it would be any new construction that happens by Working Stiff over that one-story building, because that would be the only thing that would actually block the dormers. I understand the 45-foot building abutting this the Working Stiff property is higher, but it's not actually blocking the dormers because it's not directly in line, and it is downtown. So I guess I'll stop for now, but those are some initial thoughts.
Mr. Mayor.
Just to follow up on what my board member just said, I'm struggling with this because of the 17 units. Now, obviously, Times Building hasn't changed, but the Flores Building and the short fourth or the full fourth on the back of the Times Building have changed. So that was my question as far as the configuration of the 17 units, because if they were previously before the fire, if it was 17 one-bedroom units and the building's gotten a little bigger, there should be no problem fitting in the 17 one-bedroom units. But they don't know what was there before. And now we have a 4-story building behind the Times and a much bigger building than what was there when State Street was there. So I'm left with the conclusion that while there were 17 units before and they want to recreate 17 units now, the configuration of the new 17 units is not the same. There are more bedrooms. They're bigger units. So instead of 15 ones and 2 twos, there's 10 ones and 3 twos. And that's why they need more room. That's not a hardship in my book. Now, I granted the 2B before, but now I'm having second thoughts.
I guess I would just add, there are 17
Someone
new.
like to make a motion?
Oh, okay, yes. Well,
They can.
I'm still, yeah, this is, we're still
No, that was
exploring.
my, yeah, that was my question
I would
to
just say
the
there's-
applicant. He had 17 units before,
Yeah.
had no idea what the configuration was, doesn't know what the 17 units are configured now.
Yep.
But we do know that the Flores Building has expanded, and there's 4 stories back. So the configuration of the 17 units is now larger.
Well, they've
than it
added
was
17
before.
parking spots, and a parking spot is roughly the size of a studio. So
That's their decision.
I think it's a good faith effort, so.
Mr. Ram.
I'll raise my hand and
That's fine.
thank you,
You're
Madam.
on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I guess I'm kind of confused a little bit with some of the board's obsession with the number of units here, et cetera. As the applicant, not the appellant, but the applicant reinforced tonight, what they are proposing for this 4th story on this Church Street, portion of the project that's behind the replica Times Building has not changed in any way, shape, or manner. It is the exact same size, location that the applicant presented previously and that this board had voted on previously to accept overall. The concern that we had coming in was an abutter who came back and said, hey, I don't think my the impacts to my property were properly reflected. And also, I would agree that it was a complicated project. The motion that was made to go and approve this particular variance had a lot of complicated aspects to it and wasn't necessarily fully explained. So to me, the essence is what are the negative impacts that the abutter has talked to us about tonight. And those, my sense is, from what I heard, was it primarily relates around the 3 dormers that are on the backside of the existing State Street building, which, as they pointed out, I mean, this block is a mixture of old historic structures and some, well, what had been somewhat newer, larger historic structures that burned down and are now being replaced with something that by and large has the feel of what was there before. Sort of this structure that's being proposed here is actually sort of a 1950s add-on, concrete masonry units, EMU construction, et cetera, that has been there for some period of time. So what are the impacts to it? They're talking about these 3 dormers on the back and the loss of light and air. When I look at this, I would say that the first 45 feet, which the applicant is allowed to have by right, which goes up to the bottom, to the top of the dark brown area that they have. That's, if you look at kind of the dimensioning on sheet BOA5, it's, I can get our package numbers, page 29 of our package showing up. Kind of gives us some of the dimensions there. So the first 45 feet, they have by right. In my mind, the first 45 feet are by far and away more impactful to any loss of light and air from the neighboring property than the additional, so the 4-story that they would be allowed by right, and they're actually asking to go up to the total 50 feet on that. So that additional 5 feet beyond that, what's the additional negative consequences to the abutter from that little, section of what's being proposed for an addition, in my mind, is rather inconsequential, especially considering that it's a dormer. I mean, a relatively narrow dormer isn't going to allow in lots of light anyway. It's pretty much a pretty narrowly focused in section of light that's going into whatever is for use on the 3rd story of the existing old building that the that the appellant owns. With that in mind, all the arguments that we had before, I think, still apply here, and that what is unique about this particular Church Street addition section is, what are we trying to get out of saying, oh, you can't build up that high? Nope, can't go that high. Partly it is the light and air for the neighboring properties. Again, with this particular situation of the differential amongst them, I'm just not seeing where the additional height is a truly additional negative impact beyond what is already allowed by right. And then secondly is what's the view corridors that are being impacted here? And I do think that one of the unique aspects of this particular portion of the structure that's being built along the Church Street side behind the Replica Times building and next to what is currently an empty lot owned by the abutter. The abutter would certainly have their ability to develop that at some point in time in the future. That's something that's up to them or a future owner of the property to either take advantage of or not. But in that section, really, it's the sight lines, obscured in part by the South Church, but also really a relatively narrow street, in fact, a very narrow street in Church Street, where when you look up, you're just simply not going to see that additional 5 feet in height. It's just not going to happen. You would not, the building as you would perceive it, and this is what the HDC apparently is trying to tell back to us, the building as you would perceive it would be a 3-story building. The additional height that the applicant is asking for this additional living unit would not be perceptible to anybody over there, which is one of really what we're trying to achieve in many ways with our heights. Now, on the State Street side, again, it's very, very set back from it. And I think, I thought actually the sort of the air conditioning condenser unit farm that was up there was probably the most objectionable part. That's been lowered down. And could you maybe see the top of the building from a State Street? If you're all the way over on the far sidewalk, you might be able to see it. But again, would not be like something that's right up there and giving you the impression of, whoa, that's a really big building. So I think in the sense of what we're really trying to accomplish with the ordinance, light and air, and with sight lines from adjacent areas, to me, what the applicant is asking for is meeting all of our criteria and should be granted.
I just want to give someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what I think about this. okay?
I didn't
be
mean to
blunt.
put you on the
So you
spot. I
put me on the
just wanted to
spot.
give you a chance before Ms. Marchison spoke again.
I mean, I think,
It's okay.
No, first
Everyone-
time speakers.
I think there are some special conditions to the property to take into account. It is on a narrow street, has been pointed out. It's a very dense area. I mean, outside of the lower building on Court Street and the parking lot on Court Street, this entire block is developed. The buildings come almost all the way up to the property line on the Church Street side, if not all the way to the property line. The fact that there's an interest in having a structure on State Street that's historic, and that that tries to model a historic building is a better way to put it, and the applicant has done that and has worked with the Historic District Commission to do it, does create some things on the property. Trying to tie the two buildings together, I think, as a result of that, makes some sense. Those are special conditions, and then the question is whether those special conditions, in my mind, is whether those special conditions are enough to justify that strict adherence to the ordinance is required here or is necessary here and meets some benefit to the public. And that's frankly what I'm wrestling with in my mind right now. I would also point out that, well, I'll just stop right there because, we've talked about the elevation on State Street, the elevation on Court Street. If you look at the elevation on Pleasant Street, it's a little hard for me to judge what it actually looks like if you're across the street, whether this yellow building, if you go back and look at the November 19th drawing here, this building wasn't colored in and it looked less obvious. And I think, I'm trying to make sure in my mind it's not just the color that's throwing me off here, that it looks like it stands out from the Pleasant Street side, whereas before it didn't to me. But we're not the Architectural Review Committee, so I
No,
don't want
we're
that
not.
to influence things.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Ms. Marchison.
So I think that, and this will be my final thought, I don't think light, space, and air, with all due respect to the butters, wherever they are, is something that I'm really thinking of. I'm looking at this from the view of the applicant and whether or not they have demonstrated hardship for the fourth floor on the Church Street elevation on the new construction. And that's where my analysis is. I'm going to defer to the HDC, but I do find the analysis a little, I would say, inconsistent in that they've decided to put a mansard roof where it wasn't before on the Pleasant and State Street side elevations, and then none on the Church Street. And I understand that there's a deference to the church, and that's good. But on the Pleasant Street side, there is the Treadwell House. And also, I don't know how much view comes into play in our analysis, but this will be viewable by you will see this from the Treadwell House. So I mean, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Would somebody like to make a motion? Okay, I'm just going to say one thing. May I, before I said I would? I think not having the mansard roof on that street makes a lot of sense. It's a totally different style from these more industrial buildings than the style on State and Pleasant Street are set up. And also, there is no doubt in my mind that with the mansard roof, even with the property line and coming a little forward as it hovers over the top of the building, will be more noticeable, burdensome, larger than having a fourth floor setback. So that is the way, that makes sense to me, that you might allow it on one side, but not on the other, on such a narrow street. So, having said that, is there a motion? Yes.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to approve the requested variance labeled as 2B, and with the stipulation that it reflects the height required for the times replica Times building as well as the new structure proposed by the applicant on the Church Street, the length of Church Street, including the fourth floor.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And Mr. Mattson, thank you. Okay, Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, I kind of gave some of my thoughts on this. Again, I really think it comes down to what are we trying to accomplish with this fourth story, with this additional height. We certainly we love to talk about height in the city. It's very much in much of our aspects of our zoning ordinance, particularly in the character districts. It's all really an attempt to try and create some uniformity, to try and create structures that don't have a necessarily a negative appearance from a sidewalk standpoint, from a passerby, and I do think that what is being proposed here is in compliance with that. So, looking at the first two, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would be observe the spirit of the ordinance. That's where we talk about the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. The abutter has brought up, hey, I own this old historic building that is on the block. That said, we do recognize that there are many blocks throughout our city downtown as it's grown over the 200 some odd years since the last big fire. It has certainly evolutionary aspects to it. We do have, and in my opinion, that's part of its charm, is that we do have these historic structures that are butted up against some intermediate new structures from the 1800s, say, and then even some perhaps newer structures from the 20th and 21st centuries that's being proposed. The applicant, again, but we have the Historic District Commission, which is one of our essential valves that we have to go and make sure that there is harmony in all of this. They look at many aspects that are well beyond what this board takes a look at. But what we are looking at here is a request for a height variance on a specific portion of what's being developed here. And including to really look at, we've recognized that this replica Times building, which again is trying to recreate something from the late 1800s, circa 1900 time frame, is part of that to try and recreate an essential character of this block for decades. So some of that is going to have by the nature of what our zoning ordinance says you can go and do, it does create some disparity between these older structures and newer ones. So what's being proposed for, I will call it the Church Street structure, is of an allowed height with, again, the setback for the 4 stories, so that in terms of the essential characteristics of it, it is consistent with the Times building. It's, in my mind, overall consistent with new construction that we would expect in this area as allowed by the zoning ordinance, and does not reflect something that's completely out of character. While admittedly it is different than the more historic portion, it is within character of what our zoning ordinance is telling us. Hey, this is how we want it to look. This is how the mixture of all of those many years and years of different development can come together, and it is not outside of that. And it is keeping with the spirit of the ordinance. Again, what we're trying to accomplish is through this setback, it makes so that there's from a view shed standpoint, from someone who's walking down Church Street, you would not feel like it's a taller building. Much of that effect disappears while still allowing the applicant to take advantage of some of that roof space, not all of it, but they're getting some of that roof space for an additional living area. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. Again, this is sort of our balancing test between what the applicant wants to do and what the general public purposes of the request are. And again, going back to that, again, with the sight lines aspect of it, both for the Church Street, and we also recognize that the replica Times building is very unique with its, yes, it's going to be taller, but it replicates something that was there for many, many decades, was beloved, is no longer there, but can be replicated. Even within the substantial justice of the applicant's concern about the light and air and the darkness on their dormers. Again, the vast majority of what the applicant is allowed to do by right for our zoning ordinance, in my mind, is probably creating the most negative impact for the abutter. And therefore, the additional variance that's being requested, that's what's before this board. I think the balancing test, again, goes, both in terms of the general public purposes, goes to the applicant and their request for the additional height. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, the variance that's being asked for here is this setback fourth story that is somewhat higher than what is fully allowed, would be otherwise fully allowed. And with that, I don't think that there's anything with relation to that that is of such a character that's different that you would say that in general, property values would be negatively impacted in the area. Again, mixture of construction types, sizes of structures, the Times building being right next to it sort of also lends to the fact that there is some height that we are recreating something that was old, that we want to recognize as the right thing to go and do for our city. So with all of those factors, there's nothing there that would indicate to me a diminishment of surrounding properties. And then the hardship criteria, which again really is what is unique about this particular aspect of what the applicant is asking for that says, yeah, you deserve that special consideration, whereas in general, we wouldn't allow it to have happen. And again, I do think that the narrowness of the Church Street property does create an opportunity here for the applicant, and their distance, and then again, away from the State Street. Both of those factors play into saying, yep, this request is a reasonable one within that context, because the strict needs of the ordinance, because of that narrowness, it allows you to go and take advantage of this extra height, which in other circumstances, in other parts of our city, might not be acceptable. And in fact, this board said your attempt to make it even higher over the new front structure, nope, that didn't work, because it did not have that similar positive characteristic that this has by the narrowness primarily of Church Street. So that distinguishes it from other properties, and that there's really no fair and substantial relationship between the public purposes of the ordinance and enforcing it upon the applicant to do what they are requesting to do with this addition onto the fourth floor onto this particular structure. So with that, I think that they have met all the criteria, and I recommend approval.
Does the second have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add a small point about the hardship is, and I guess it also loosely relates to the spirit of the ordinance and the essential characters. Because of this, a big driving factor of this is the recreation of the Times building, which dictates a lot of the heights. And this yellow portion that there is the concern on the on Church Street, attached to the Times building, is actually a good portion of that story would be allowed by right. We're just allowing them to complete that story because basically half of it is already allowed. It's just they're completing it, and the height driving because of all the stories below is. Those are taller stories than typical because it's matching the Times building. And then additionally, they're trying to incorporate 17 parking spots, which benefits the public greatly by freeing up parking spaces. And it's just an overall benefit, I'd say.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Ms. Hodgson.
So just on the motion, I check our general purposes and intent, and one of the purposes and intent of our zoning ordinance is to preserve and enhance the visual environment. So view corridors obviously are a part of that. I myself would look at it from the Pleasant Street location as well in terms of our analysis. I will not be supporting the motion, probably as evidenced by my comments. I simply just don't see hardship for the fourth floor here, especially since they could recreate the Times building without it.
Are we ready to vote? Okay. So a yes vote allows the 50 feet. Mr. Neese?
No.
Mr. Mantle?
No.
Ms. Margison?
No.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So you are approved. And I want to apologize to 408 The Hill, but we're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we are back, and the next item on the agenda is the request of Rosa Z. Delisle and Paul R. Delisle, Revocable Trust, owners for property located at 408 The Hill, number 6 through 17, units 1 through 3. Whereas after-the-fact relief is needed for the expansion of the existing business into the remaining first-floor units, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.440, use number 7.20, to allow a personal services business to expand where it is not allowed. And 2, variance from section 10.331, to allow a non-conforming use to be extended, enlarged, or changed where not in conformity of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 118, Lot 26, and lies within the Character District 4L1, Historic and Downtown Overlay Districts. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Good evening. My name is Ashley Stearns. I'm the owner of Blush Skin and Soul Spa at 408 The Hill. Before I get started, I'd like to request to submit an additional item to the chair as new materials to serve as a site plan, just to kind of give a clearer picture.
Sure, you can hand those out to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can just
Yeah,
give it
we'll
all to us.
pass.
We'll pass. It gives us something to do.
Okay. So Blush Skin and Soul Spa has been a part of the Portsmouth community since 2017, beginning as a one-woman business, myself, in Unit 2 of 408 The Hill. Over the years, it has grown into a thriving wellness business, now employing a team of 10 professionals who provide high-quality aesthetic and massage therapy services that promote self-care and well-being for both residents and visitors. Blush operates 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. by appointment only, ensuring a controlled and structured flow of clients throughout the day. The business's appointment-based model prevents excessive foot traffic and allows for an organized, low-impact operation. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2 other tenants on the first floor of 408 The Hill vacated their spaces. The landlord offered Blush Skin and Soul Spa the opportunity to expand into the entire first floor, which allowed the business to continue growing and providing essential wellness services to the community. I mistakenly did not realize that additional permits were required for this expansion. I sincerely apologize for this oversight and want to emphasize my commitment to doing things the correct way. The issue only came to my attention when the New Hampshire State Board of Aesthetics conducted a routine inspection, the first, not by my choice, but they just simply had not come since 2017. And that led me to discover that additional permits were necessary. So I'm now proactively taking steps to ensure full compliance with the City of Portsmouth. Importantly, no changes were made to the space in order to operate as we currently do, and no future changes are needed at this time. The space remains in its original intended condition, fully functional for the services provided. Blush Skin and Soul Spa has sufficient parking availability for clients with options along High Street and Deer Street, as well as the Hanover and Foundry garages. These parking options ensure that customers can conveniently access the business without creating a burden on surrounding properties. To speak to the points. 1, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Article 10, Section 233.21. Blush Skin and Soul Spa has long been a positive contributor to the Portsmouth community, supporting local economic growth, participating in charitable initiatives, and offering a space dedicated to wellness and self-care. The spa operates in a quiet, professional manner, ensuring that it does not disrupt the character of the hill or the surrounding businesses. The appointment-only model minimizes traffic and maintains a controlled flow of clients throughout the day, further reducing any potential impact on the area. Granting the variance will allow Blush Skin and Soul Spa to continue operating in a way that benefits the public without any negative impact. 2, the spirit of the ordinance will be observed. Article 10, Section 233.22. The purpose of zoning regulations is to ensure compatible land use and maintain the integrity of the community. Blush Skin and Soul Spa fully aligns with these objectives by operating within a historically mixed-use commercial and residential district, maintaining a professional, low-impact presence that enhances the area, and contributing to Portsmouth's vibrant small business economy. Since no structural changes have been made and none are planned, the business remains in harmony within the existing zoning intent while complying with the city requirements. 3, substantial justice will be done. Article 10, Section 233.23. Denying the variance would impose a significant and unnecessary hardship on a business that has operated successfully in this location since 2017. There is no public benefit in forcing the business to relocate, as it has already been successfully operating within the space for years without any issues. Approving the variance will allow Blush Skin and Soul Spa to continue serving the community while ensuring all permitting requirements are met. 4, the values of the surrounding property will not be diminished. Article 10, Section 233.24. Blush Skin and Soul Spa enhances the value of the hill and the surrounding properties by maintaining a well-kept professional space that complements the historic nature of the area, attracting clientele who support other local businesses, contributing to the area's economic health, and operating in a quiet, appointment-based manner, ensuring a seamless fit with the surrounding businesses and residences. Since no changes have been made to the building or its use, the presence of Blush Skin and Soul Spa will not negatively impact neighboring property values. 5, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. 10.233.25. Strict enforcement of the zoning ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to the unique conditions of this property and its history. Blush Skin and Soul Spa has operated in this location for over 7 years without any prior concerns. The landlord encouraged the expansion during COVID, making it a natural and necessary progression for the business. There are no reasonable alternative uses for the space that would provide the same community and economic benefits. Since no changes were made to the space and none are needed, denying the variance would create an artificial and undue burden on the business without serving the public interest. I'm not sure if you need me to read beyond that here. I'm happy to.
It's really up to you. You've covered the criteria.
The criteria.
which-
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. I guess that's what
Yes,
that was my
fine.
asking.
But
So
it is up to you.
Okay, thank you. So I would respectfully request approval of this variance to continue operating within units 1 through 3 on the first floor of 408 The Hill. Thank you.
Are there questions for the applicant? Yes, Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in our staff report, they indicate that when you first put the business together in 2017, that you were actually replacing an existing esthetician studio that was in that same location?
That's
Is that
correct.
And do you have any idea how long that business had been in operation?
I truly don't know the answer to that. I think at least, over a year, maybe a couple of years, but I don't know the exact answer to that question. I did do a tenant fit up for that unit in 2017, and that was approved, but I failed to submit an application when I did expand.
Okay. And then massage therapy services, understand that well. I'm an awesome massage therapist. But your aesthetic services, could you just give us a couple examples of what other services that you offer
Yeah,
as part of your business model?
So we do, estheticians do facials, bridal makeup, pedicures, waxing, brow and lash services, just personal care and beauty services.
It could be a guy thing. I guess I just didn't 100%.
It's totally okay.
What that was. Not that a guy can't have all those services as well. So.
You're more
Okay.
than welcome. It's very pink, but you're welcome
Yeah.
to come.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then, so just trying to take a look on our package, it's toward the end of your presentation. It's on page 45. You kind of give a little bit of layout, and I know you tried to provide some, maybe a little bit additional information here this evening. But,
Yeah.
So Unit 2, which was the largest unit, looks like was your original portion of your business.
That's correct.
And then you added on Unit 1 and 3, which look like 2 rooms across the hall that essentially, at together, probably about the same size as your original. You essentially doubled your business in
That's
size.
correct. Yes. So I have 4 treatment rooms now.
Okay. And then you have 10 employees. Do they all work simultaneously in those 3 rooms, or do they
We
spread
can
out
only
over-
have 4 people at a time because we have 4 rooms and we don't have a receptionist. So there's just 4 providers and 4 clients in at one time.
Okay. So basically, like, some people have certain days off, other people would come in and take their
Correct.
place. Okay. Understood. Great. That's all I have for questions.
Anything else? Yes, Ms. Marchison.
My question is to staff, and following up on Mr. Ram's first point, how is this allowed to be established to begin with?
It appears to be permanent. It was permitted as a change of ownership for an existing non-conforming use, which was the esthetician studio in Unit 2. So that's what it looked like. In 2017, they issued a tenant fit-up permit for Unit 2 for esthetician studio change of ownership.
So, because it was pre-existing before then, it was allowed under the zoning
In Unit 2.
in Unit 2.
Anything else?
I guess I apologize. I do have one more question, if I may, Madam Chair. So I'm actually kind of impressed or amazed that a state aesthetics inspection picked up on this issue, or like, how was the chain of events there that actually came through to make you realize that there was an issue?
Yeah, so it was actually about a year ago. They stopped by unannounced, if they stopped by. And so I got a knock on my treatment room door, and I was in with a client, and I popped my head out, and she was talking to me about how they had seen my other space, but because there's a shared hallway with the 2 tenants that live upstairs, they wanted me to apply for a second shop license or a second and third shop license. So they were able to see, they made me aware that that in order to get those second and third shop licenses, because they won't just let me have it under one because of that shared hallway. So I have to do multiple shop licenses, and that's where in the process of trying to correct that, I figured out that that I needed to do this.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes,
Sorry.
Mr. Ray.
One last final question. So you say all of your clients are by appointment only?
Correct.
If this board were to grant your variance but put a stipulation on there that said that everything would have to be by appointment only, that would not be necessarily a negative impact to you?
Totally fine. We don't do walk-ins anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Public hearing is closed. Yes, Mr. Reese.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion if you're willing to go right to it. I'd like to make a motion to grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised, subject to the condition that it will continue to be by appointment only business.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you. To go through the criteria, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. There will be no changes to the health, safety, or welfare in the neighborhood. Traffic has been handled and parking is available. That's not going to increase with the granting of this variance. No effect on light and air. There will be no changes to the essential character of the neighborhood, as if you walk through the Hill area, almost all of these buildings have some sort of business on the first floor, and it appears apartments upstairs, though I don't know that for sure. Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. In the CD4L1 area, the purpose of that zoning is to promote walkable mixed-use development. This is exactly what this does. This is a use that is not allowed by right, but it is not really contrary to the objective of this zoning. There are other uses in the area that are perhaps not identical, but somewhat similar. A Pilates instructor, counseling services that are probably similar in a way with the amount of traffic. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. It allows the operation to continue. There's no benefit to the public by strict enforcement of the ordinance. There would be a loss to both the tenant and the landlord that would exceed any possible benefit to the public by enforcing the ordinance. Granting the variance will not diminish the values of surrounding properties. There's been no evidence presented that it would diminish the value of surrounding properties. It's been in existence in some form for a long time, and no one has complained about that, so I don't think there's any evidence that that will happen. This area does have special conditions, and Little does have special conditions. Let me itemize those first. It's located in a very unique enclave in the center of Portsmouth, or near downtown Portsmouth. It's an area of relocated old historic buildings. It's an area of mixed uses as desired by zoning. This particular building, particularly on the first floor, it has a number of small unit sizes that would, I'm sure, limit the desirability for any commercial uses. It's particularly if you tried to take the 2 rooms on the one side and rent them out to separate commercial uses. I think owing to these conditions, there's no fair and substantial relationship to prohibit this use as required by the ordinance and apply that to the property.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a couple things, Madam Chair. So first of all, towards the fact that this is an after-the-fact variance, always concerning. Certainly don't want to see a situation where an applicant comes before us and is asking to justify something they've been doing for several years. That said, my sense from the discussion is that it was an honest mistake in that our ordinance and certainly the idea that, hey, I'm adding 2 more rooms to my business. Like, my business has been here. It's really, it's just, me having a little bit of an expansion. What's the big deal? Certainly I can see where that can catch some, an entrepreneurial owner by surprise. So I do think that there's no malice in this. Interesting how it did get caught, but that said, when the situation was clear, I think the applicant is now trying to make a good faith effort to come before us and rectify it. The other kind of interesting thing is the nature of this particular use for personal services, and this is why I do think that the stipulation is very important for the appointments, because personal services in our ordinance is defined as establishments providing frequent or recurrent services related to personal needs, including the accessory retail sales of products related to the services offered. Examples include beauty, barber shops, nail salons, tanning salons, clothing rental, tailors, dry cleaning pickup, garment and shoe repair shops, and similar businesses. So it's a pretty broad category of uses. It is only not allowed in the CD4 L1. So it is allowed by special exception in CD4 L2, and certainly most of the surrounding area of the hill is CD4 and CD5, where this would be a perfectly allowable use. I think the fact that the hill is kind of unique, put it into the CD4 L1. The idea there is it's maybe got a little bit more of a neighborhood feel to it, rather than in the CD4 and CD5, where it's a bit more of a businessy type of feel to those neighborhoods as the zoning allows. But that said, if you look on Google Maps at the types of other businesses that are allowed, office businesses, most of them are by appointment. So there are other ones, insurance agencies and others that are in this area. There's actually a couple other personal services type businesses. I will leave it up to the code enforcement officer on any concerns with any of those. But I think that this appointment model that the applicant is using here is consistent with those other uses that are allowed. And so I think in that sense, with that stipulation, really ensures that we are keeping to the spirit of the ordinance and the general characteristics of the neighborhood of this little enclave of CD4L1, where, again, uniquely this very broad personal services, which could include a lot of walk-up or drive-up type services. That's not what this applicant has. They have something very, very distinct from that, and I think that makes me feel better about granting the variance.
Thank you. Okay, let's vote. Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
No.
Mr. Vayam?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
No.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And chair votes yes, so you are approved. Thank you for your patience again. Do I have to join this meeting before we go into okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, the next item of business is, no, we're going over the Board of Adjustment rules and regulations. Will you join us? You can stay up there, whatever makes you happy.
This is not a public hearing, obviously.
This is not a public hearing, but nor is it a non-public, it's just a continuation.
Okay.
We just lost our television audience.
Oh, no.
No, I'm just saying, because now we're on to rules and
Right,
regulations.
right. I know, rules and regs, people.
Trevor's excited.
All right, I don't know how we want to do this. Would you like to go through it?
Should we
Yeah, you
let
can do-
Mr.
yeah, sure,
Report,
however you
attorney
wanna do it.
report?
Yeah.
Rather than have him walk back and forth to the mic.
Yeah, no, you,
I'm gonna stand. I can stand. Just hang out up
I
there.
want you to do whatever makes you comfortable.
I want to make you comfortable, Chair.
I'm comfortable with
Well,
you.
I would be comfortable if we would proceed.
My apologies.
You need to leave.
No, but I would like to get on with it.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Okay. So, do people have particular questions for, yes, Mr. Neese?
I have a number of them,
Okay.
but
Oh, God.
we're just going to walk through. I don't know if you just want me to jump into them, or if you want to walk through, and I'll bring them up as we go along.
Why don't we do,
Can I just preface that
Yes.
these are changes that came out of our work session in September. So all of the changes that you see in red or red line or blue or purple are from the notes that we took from that meeting as to the changes that the board wanted to see in the rules and regulations. So I would like to hear your comments on the changes as we've updated them, and to know if you want to make any further changes before we would then move this to a public hearing in April or any future meeting, so that you can,
So then we could,
Public hearing would be a
public meeting.
public meeting.
Public meeting. You don't need a hearing.
Public meeting.
You would just vote.
so then really you just want comments by exception. We don't have to read through
Right.
the whole thing.
Yeah, so we can either just say, yes, it looks great, or we can, go to your specific comment or question that you would like updated or changed or.
yeah, so go ahead.
Let's do it that way, yeah.
Okay, so I'll go to page 4, item number 6, minimum requirements for adequate plans. The fourth bullet, we're changing the drawings do not need to be scaled unless requested by the code official. Is there some sort of practice the code official uses to make that determination?
That they don't need to be to scale?
That
Why did we say
This
that?
reverses it. This says they do not need to be made to scale unless the code official insists on it.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what sort of guidelines the code official uses. Because I can see, I guess my concern is, as an example, if someone would walk in with a major development and the buildings are not to scale, it's difficult for us to understand how they match with each other. Now, I would expect the code official in that case would say, yes, they do need to be to scale, but I would like some degree of comfort that that's what would happen.
Yeah, I think it would depend on, what the details of the application were. Sometimes we'll see from some simple residential applications where we've got hand-drawn plans, and that's okay. But if we've got something that's close to the property line, or we need a specific dimension, I think in that case, we would ask them to be to scale.
I think that the reversal would actually fit better. Drawings need to be in scale unless code official says not to.
I agree, that should be the default condition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why did we change
Because-
that? I don't remember.
yeah,
Man,
Yeah, I don't remember that at all, but
yes, Mr. Ram.
sorry, I'm trying to follow.
No, you don't, go ahead.
Yeah, so this was a comment that I brought up. So tonight, our applicant for the aesthetician, try to say that 20 times fast. So if you look at the plan that was provided of the floor plan, not to scale, We see that fairly commonly with the, a homeowner type application, which in this particular case, you know what, we were able to get a lot of the information out of it. Certainly if an architect is involved, I mean, you know where the additional amount of information is really necessary for the board to make a good decision. I'm trusting of the staff to be able to know where that line is and help us out with it. But I would agree, I think that the wording here, the default should be to scale unless the code official grants the ability to say, yeah, you know what, for your particular application.
Or determines otherwise.
Determines that, right, okay, I think that makes a lot of sense.
So Trevor, you're going to be doing the wordsmithing for us?
I have a note on my version right here.
There you go.
Happy to take that on with planning staff.
I'm also making notes.
Next, Mr. Neese?
Next one.
Same page down at the bottom, number 14. Well, I could probably live with this. I guess I'm a little concerned. Not
so
everybody is comfortable with electronically combining PDF files into one file.
Right.
And it just seems like it could be off-putting to some of the people who come before the board to try and do that. I think what's been happening right now, is probably the staff, when they get multiple copies, combines them into one file.
We ask the applicants to combine them into one before submitting them, and it doesn't always happen in that way, but it's so that we're not assembling their application for them.
Yeah,
So-
it should be.
They should assemble it in the order that they want it to be seen, to be heard, to be presented, and that shouldn't be a staff decision, it should be an applicant decision. Which is why we ask that.
Moving on to page 6. This is one we had considerable discussion at last September. Item, I guess it's renumbered, item number, well, I think it's item number 7 renumbered, maybe it's item number 6.
Oh, the tie.
This is the tie vote issue. And I guess, I tell you, I know I brought up at the meeting, and people didn't like the idea that our first motion, the first motion that should be considered is a motion to approve. Because then if that fails on a tie vote, it's either denied or somebody makes a modified motion that also gets approved. And the reason that I think that way, it's kind of reiterated here, is you wind up with a situation now, the way this is worded, where if you have a motion to deny and it fails on a tie vote, and then you have a motion to approve and it fails on a tie vote, the reality is that the board has not made a decision. But the interpretation, according to this, is assuming that there's no further motions, it's denied. It's no change to this.
Do you not see that as a decision? There wasn't enough.
Well, the problem is you've got 2 votes that both failed. If you only had 1 vote that if the motion to approve fails, and you say, okay, the motion to approve failed, we revert to, under National Environmental Policy Act terms, you revert to the status or no action alternative, which is there's no variance. That's basically what happens. But if you have a vote to approve that fails, now you have a vote to deny that fails, how can you say that the board has denied it? The board has got 2 motions that failed in front of them.
Because
Failed to
neither
approve.
one received the number of votes needed to pass.
But, right, the motion to deny didn't receive the number of votes needed to pass. How can you conclude that the board has denied the motion? That's what I would argue, is I was on the losing side.
How can you insist that people only make positive motions negative? What happens if you don't want to?
Wait, we're losing our attorney.
No, I think he's checking something.
He's leaving. You drove him away.
Under your way of thinking, someone should not be permitted to make a vote
Well,
to
I know.
deny.
Okay, I understand. I see your concern there, but if a motion to approve fails, it's been denied.
Right.
We have had,
It's-
but that would mean people would have to make, if we did not permit a motion to deny, that would mean people would be forced, some board member would be forced to make a pro forma motion to approve something they don't want to approve, and they would end up voting against their own motion, which has happened in this board in the past.
Think of Congress.
It's a weird way to do
No,
business.
that's not a good example.
Let's not think of Congress right now.
Well, all right.
Well,
We have
but,
enough
but
problems
the,
with
but
our
the end
own
result
board.
is, if you want to get approved, you have to get 4 positive votes. And you will not have gotten the 4 positive votes. It really also goes back to new paragraph 6, right? If we have a motion to approve and it fails to get 4 positive votes, then it does not, the action is that the approval does not happen. Really, ultimately, people aren't coming before us for a denial, they're coming before us for an approval. They just simply never get that approval, right? A motion to deny is one way of not giving an approval, but a failure to meet the criteria for approval is another way of not getting an approval. That, people don't come before us to get us to deny something.
We've had a situation since I've been on the board, well, I think it happened when I was on the board, where we had a motion to approve that failed and a motion to deny that failed.
Right.
Absolutely.
Often.
That's a fail.
What's the decision?
Well, it
Just
didn't
like
necessarily
saying you-
fail, it ended in a tie vote,
It ended
correct?
in a tie vote, which
Right.
by Robert's rules and by our rules is a failure.
Right.
I don't have a problem with having one motion with a tie vote and whatever that motion, let's turn it around. If you had a motion to deny and it failed, would you interpret that as it's an approval?
I would say that there's an absence of an approval. When people come before us, they are looking for an approval, they do not get their approval. And that can either come from a motion to deny, or it can come from a failure to get a
Failed motion to
motion
approve.
that ultimately is an approval.
Yeah.
Those are the two ways you can not be approved.
That's not what I asked.
Yeah.
Would you ever foresee a situation where a motion to deny fails? Why don't we say that's an approval?
Right, which we go around and we say you still, to meet our criteria of saying to somebody that you have an approval, a motion to deny that fails, you then need to go and get one that is an approval.
So you're not convincing me. If you have 2 motions and they both fail, there hasn't been a decision.
There has.
But there
There
has
has
been,
by the
because
fact that-
It's like saying, I mean, if you need 4 votes for an approval, you need 4 votes.
No, I'm not
Whether
I'm
for
not
a
talking
motion-
about the case where you get like a 3
He's
to
talking
4
about
vote.
denials.
I'm talking about a tie.
So
I
am
understand what you're
I'm
saying.
talking about a tie vote. You put a motion up to approve and it fails. You put a motion up to deny and it fails.
Right. And
How does that default to a denial?
Because you didn't get the
Because you didn't get the
required
approval.
amount of
The
affirmative
motion
votes.
to deny failed.
No, you didn't get,
Yeah.
but you still, even taking the 2 motions together, you still have not gotten enough affirmative motions for an
Right, you haven't
approval.
got, do you have something that would clarify this?
Please.
Sure,
Let me
because
ask you this, Tom.
No, let's let Trevor talk.
This is because we are required to have affirmative motions. Let's say we didn't have that requirement, and there was a motion to approve, which tied. That's a denial. That's it. End of story, out the door, whatever. Because we don't have to take another motion, right? Because now we're only on one motion, and it was a tie, it's a denial.
Right. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, we don't have that because we, as a board, have to make affirmative motions. So if we make a motion that gets shot down, we still have to make an affirmative motion, whether it's to approve or deny, so that we can approve a motion.
Not, our own rules say that's not the case if the motion to approve fails on a tie vote.
I don't agree with you. I think the rewritten rules put us in the exact conundrum that you are trying to avoid. Because now the rewritten rules say that a motion to deny, that it also requires a vote of 4 affirmative votes. Without that requirement, then I think we're in perfectly safe territory. If all we have to say is that a motion to approve needs 4 votes. Period, full stop. You don't need anything beyond that. You can have all the ties you want. And I really particularly do not like the last sentence in the revised paragraph because it puts too much of an onus on the chairperson to
All
break
it's
a
really
deadline.
asking, because I met with the department about this before, is asking you for the reasons for the denial. That's all it's asking. I'm requesting of you that the applicant understand why this failed.
We are only required to give one reason for failure. And that could be a separate paragraph even.
Well, and it could be, but when I first read it, I was somewhat alarmed that I had this control, but it really is just so the applicant goes away knowing.
We owe applicants, sorry, Trevor, but we owe applicants one of two things, an approval or the reasons why they didn't get the approval. And that, again, that lack of approval may come through a motion to deny, or it may come through not getting enough votes to meet our threshold to be approved. If they don't get an approval, the other thing they need to walk away from this board with is, why didn't I get that approval? Those they're looking for one of those two things, and the reasons why it's woohoo, or and the reasons why it's right?
Yes, I'm sorry, we'll have to go through that, watching.
Woohoo and awe.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you to hold a second.
Yeah, and so it is.
Mr. Mattson.
Yes, it's all related to this. Tom, I appreciate your thought experiment, and I totally understand what you're saying with the if the motion to deny is unsuccessful, how can you say it's a denial? But I guess where I would take one more step back is anytime someone is applying to the board here, the default is that they cannot do what they're asking to do. So you're starting off essentially from a place of denial where they're seeking approval. And as you pointed out, the reverse scenario is, of course, we wouldn't say that a fail to deny is an approval. So something has to happen out of the application hearing. So if we're not going to say you're approved because we failed to deny you, the alternative is another way to be essentially denied by a lack of approval, because the default is the not allowed denial. I guess that's my stab at it.
Okay, Trevor, take it away.
Okay, so if you have to look at these rules kind of together and to really figure out what they mean, which is unfortunate but true. You take this rule that we're focused on now, the new 7. You take Rule 8, and you take Rule 5, and what all of those say is, I don't care what else is going on, but you need to have 4 affirmative votes to pass it. And if you can't get 4 affirmative votes, it just doesn't pass. Now, how do you get there? How do you determine when you're done, right? And that was that kind of the conundrum that we spun around, having the same kind of conversation last time. And this was our attempt to memorialize what we thought the board wanted out of that conversation. Because how do you know when you're done? And how do you know when it's clear you're not going to get the 4 votes? Obviously, if you can't get the four votes, any other result is a denial, right? If it's clear you're not going to get it. And then there needs to be some procedure, as David was saying, to figure out the why. I won't use the sound effects, but to figure out the why, right? Why did I not get it? When there wasn't a positive vote, you know what I mean? When there wasn't a majority vote, this is comes up in the scenario when there's only 6 people here, right? Or 4, I suppose. Or someone's abstaining or what have you.
Or 5, right? You can only get 3 affirmative votes and there's only 5 voting members. You didn't get there.
True.
Well,
Fair
I think
enough.
Mr. Rossi's suggestion is better than this language, to be honest. I think your suggestion to write it to say you need 4 affirmative votes for the variance might get away from this concern I have about the possibility that you have 2 motions that fail that turn into a denial.
I agree with you.
Number 5 does say that. An affirmative vote by 4 members
Rule 5
present
says
and
that.
voting is necessary to grant a variance.
I would be satisfied if you just strike the newly inserted or deny, because with a lot more words, it says what you and I just said.
Yeah. It's the rule beforehand.
Okay, does that make sense?
So
Does that cover it?
I want to see it in writing, but I think it makes sense.
So let me just say it back so I'm sure I understand here. I apologize. So it's, the new 6 would say if a motion to grant a variance, special exception, or appeal results in a tie vote, then the result is a denial.
Yes.
So if there's a motion to deny that is tied, just there's no result. You just have to try again,
It
basically.
defaults to
It was just
you
an
didn't get
unsuccessful, and you just have to do something else.
It defaults to you didn't get 4 votes
You didn't, oh, sure.
to get the approval. So, yeah, you don't, that's it.
Sure. Yeah, I guess my only other, that, I would think it would make sense to put in there the thing that happens next, well, because it's a tie. So I suppose someone has so it's a motion to deny, so I suppose someone has articulated the rationale.
We don't know, and that's what's happened in the past, right, is we had a tie vote, a case where we didn't get the 4 affirmative votes. I think in that particular case it was a tie, and no one ever said, the people that voted against it had never said boo about the reasons why they were against, they were unwilling to say yes to the motion to approve. And the business ended. We said, oh, sorry, you're not approved. We sent them on their way. And they didn't get the piece that they needed of, well, why was I not approved? So that was why the language was inserted the way it was to try and make sure that some way, somehow, we get that information and hand that to the applicant who did not get what they were looking for.
So does it make sense then, could you put another, not to add more rules here, but to add another rule that says in making any motion, the member shall, provide the analysis,
Right.
whatever.
It's
something
not the
along those lines.
motion, though, it's
But
the
it
But
other
it was the
voters,
folks that voted against it that never
Right.
said.
So-
not the motion.
The chair has to
Votes.
But
solicit
then the
comments.
chair could solicit comments.
Right.
When
Yeah.
something is denied,
Yeah.
I could solicit comments so that whomever the chair is, can do it.
Right.
Right? Does
Right,
that kind of
okay.
cover it?
If you do it outside of a motion, then that's fine. You just need to capture, why did those 3 people, point at them? Why did you just say no?
Well, someplace you need a sentence that goes along the lines of, in the event of a denial. Now, it doesn't have to be a vote to deny. It could be a failure to achieve an approval.
Correct.
Right, so.
In the event of a failure to achieve approval.
In the event of a failure to achieve approval,
Okay, yeah.
the applicant the board will tell the applicant, to give the reason or reasons for, I would just prefer to call it a denial rather than failure to approve. But it's a separate sentence, it's a separate thought from the voting process. That's what I'm trying to say.
And that's the essence of what we were trying to capture in that paragraph.
Anyway, not to belabor the point, I think this paragraph
Okay.
just makes it muddier.
Would you want that instead of the last sentence or in addition to?
I don't care where it goes. The last sentence becomes unnecessary by removing the word or deny.
So we are striking or deny. Are we?
Oh, that's my suggestion.
Okay.
Right, so if I'm understanding, and, the board, I would appreciate more feedback on this, but, I think where we're going with this is you strike the or deny, and basically you insert a new rule here, which very clearly lays out, the motion maker has to provide the rationale, and then if there's an unsuccessful vote that leads to a denial, or a tie that leads to a denial, some language covering that scenario, then the
chair has an obligation to solicit reasons for why the application did not meet, was not approved.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
We have always, I think, when there is a tie vote to deny, asked someone else to make one to approve, but that's
Sure.
not necessary now, is it?
That would-
I mean, one may do that, but that's not.
That's the other way around.
Yeah, do we all?
Well, so the problem there goes back to Mr. Neese's conundrum, which is you had a motion to deny that technically
Right.
didn't pass.
Right. Yeah, just stop, okay.
Can I just make-
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Mattson.
yes, my one comment that I would like to see out of this is that, not the motion maker to deny, but whenever, or I guess so on a motion, an affirmative motion, board members that vote to deny, saying why they vote to deny. I guess that's the,
When there is a tie,
Or
or just,
Yeah, I mean.
well, just,
just otherwise, if it's.
you don't have to ask it right away, but if there's no passing and no failing, making sure that,
That the criteria of.
yeah,
are
why
referred to.
they voted
Right.
not to approve.
Only on a tie vote.
Well, we'll look at that when it's all,
Yeah, when there's been a failure to pass, yeah,
Just gotta have the reasons why it failed on the record,
yeah.
right.
whichever
That
way
would-
it
yeah.
happens, however it fails,
You have to have on record the reasons why it was not approved.
Yeah,
Right,
not approved.
yeah, okay.
okay?
So I think that's one that will have to be rewritten and
Oh,
put
yeah,
in front
and
of
come
us
back,
again.
of course.
I think that may be the only one, just sort of looking through. So.
Yeah.
So, if I might, Madam Chair? I'll
Yes,
go on.
please,
You got it,
go
sir.
right ahead, it's all yours.
Moving on to page 7 to get away from motions for a minute. Miscellaneous, item number 4. I just have a question about interpretation of this one. I understand that we only want to have one active application in front of us at a time. I thought of this after the fact, so don't yell at me, but
No one's yelling.
we recently had an instance where we had an applicant come back to us several times over the course of several meetings. And every time we came back, the application changed significantly. And so,
At the request of the board.
It had to, or we wouldn't have
no,
heard it.
the request
again.
of the board was to provide additional information to support it.
Oh,
And then
that
they came back and changed the application, and we asked for additional information to support it. And they came back and changed the application, I
was-
think, a second or third time.
Which one was that,
And I
Tom?
guess my,
The one I was accused of.
Yes,
The Heinemann
okay,
building.
okay. We're feeling that we shouldn't get into individual applications
right,
on
but
it.
my question is, I don't think we allow people, if we did a hearing here, we haven't allowed people to change their applications while they're talking at a hearing in front of us. But do we allow them to change their application if we extend the hearing when all we asked for was additional information? And does that start to fall into this problem where they've got more than one application in front of us?
No, this was
'Cause
my.
the others are gone.
Yeah, so this was my suggestion, that we have approved or denied an application, and it's gone on to the Housing Appeals Board and Superior Court. And then while that is pending, they submit a new application for us.
Correct.
And this precludes that from being able to happen.
Whereas with the ones you're talking about, the new app, each new application voided the previous one. They didn't have other applications.
We didn't have a
on it.
final
We
decision.
didn't actually say that,
No, they did.
only after asking them.
That was just an exception to almost every rule we've
But,
had
the-
while we've been
yeah,
sitting.
but also, in order not to avoid not getting involved with that application, but the reality is that this is when a final decision has been made from this board.
So talking in generalities, I mean, some applicants who come before us, while they're speaking, they'll say, hey, we changed this thing or whatever. It, you know, there is times when they kind of on the fly make some changes, but certainly if the board gives them an opportunity to say, hey, provide us with, you know, some new information, I do think we ultimately open it back up, so long as it's done in a public forum and they resubmit and, you know, the public gets again to look at what's being resubmitted. I think that's a vulnerability that we create by giving them more, you know, asking them for a follow-on submission.
But that's not this case. This is when we have
No,
actually made a
100%,
final
I'm trying to address
decision.
Mr. Neese's
Yeah.
concern.
Thank you.
And sometimes
In a
we ask
generalized,
them to make changes.
non-specific way.
Yep. So page 8, I'm just curious why 5D got eliminated? Is that because the chair never makes press releases, or is there some other reason why that got
I
dropped out?
don't know that that's ever happened.
Yeah, I don't know
It
that that's
just
ever
doesn't-
happened either.
Yeah.
But would we
Was,
want that in there? I mean,
Some old language about radio releases that isn't very applicable anymore, apparently.
well, what do you want board members to do if we get contacted by a member of the press asking us about a board
Hang
decision?
up.
No comment.
I mean, that would be my answer, is no
Yeah.
comment. But
Correct, yeah.
do we want something in the rules that say, talk to, I don't know who?
Should go to staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, go to staff.
So should that be that in the rules, just to make it clear? None of us want to talk to the press, but you might get somebody who's more voluble.
Sorry, I just, it would always be, staff is here to assist you. It'd always be a recommendation to rely on staff for things like that. But, you retain your freedom of speech. We can't restrict people's ability to talk in the press, talk to whomever through these rules. I mean, you don't abandon your right to free speech by becoming a member of this board.
Oh, really?
Certainly.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't know I still have freedoms.
There's still, yeah.
So,
I disagree with that, but, okay.
Well, I think that this is saying all press and radio releases regarding the applications are to be made as are recorded within the minutes of the board meeting and shall originate with the chair. It sounds like any kind of official proclamation needs to be done within the minutes and via the
but it
chair.
sounds like release, I mean, if there's an article about this upcoming vote, as there have been time and time again, are those articles considered press releases and should be included in the minutes? Whether or not any of us are quoted?
So a press release,
We don't
this
have
is
press
very
or radio
broad.
anymore.
Right.
Well, we have, we
but
have
a
press.
press release means that the city is releasing that
Right.
information of their own accord. Not that that somebody in the press has decided to write about
Right about it.
something.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, what's a radio? Okay, no, we don't need that.
I mean,
We
I
don't
think
issue
it's
press
before we
releases.
had, videos of all of our meetings and everything. I mean, let's face it, that's like how half the articles are written, is they go back and watch some on video. right?
Absolutely.
So the next one, is the annual report shared with the other board members? Number 6.
Annual report,
Shall be prepared by the chair and submitted to the city in it mostly talks about absenteeism.
Yeah, it was just on the city council
Yeah,
agenda.
Just on the city council.
It's just not you. Just not you.
Yeah, right, isn't that just who attends the meetings and how many we,
as far as I know, but
Yeah.
it does get reported.
Right. For the record, nobody had 100% attendance last year, so.
I know, I noticed that. I also didn't think that my 3 excused absences would
do
be
we
held
keep,
against me. But
do we
anyway.
keep track of tardies? Because
Not to my knowledge.
yeah.
my report cards would have looked a lot better without those. Tom, are you,
He's still going through his list.
No, I just a comment very quickly. I mean, I am a little concerned that while we say that we can submit suggestions to the planning department or the city council, we don't have anything that says how or when we're going to do that. And I think the result of that is that we don't do it. I mean, we have occasionally at times at meetings, ZBA members have made comments about, why do they have to come to us because they have another 0.1% of lot coverage?
right.
Or something like that. And it seems like there ought to be a way that we track those comments, and I don't know, once a year, we sit down, do we have anything we want to relay to the planning department, or not?
yeah.
And I think that some of when you emailed me about what happened to all the other suggestions that we had, and I think that was part of those
Right.
that went quite beyond this. And I talked to Trevor in the hall, and he has the comments from that earlier meeting in September, and we will get together to talk about those other things when we, soonish.
But to me, the miscellaneous section would be a spot, if we thought that was worthwhile to say we're going to do that, I don't know, December, January, June, the miscellaneous section of the rules would be a place to write that in.
Well, it could be as part of the annual meeting. We talk about policy and procedure in that
Yeah,
one.
that makes
Maybe
sense.
staff
That's a
could come
good
up
time
with a
of year.
suggested agenda for this annual meeting and that,
Yeah.
here's the things we should talk about, and then, yeah. It's a valid point.
It is.
And I'm done. I'd like to make one comment on something on page 8, if I may.
You may.
It's regard to item 9, and the applicant submitting a request to postpone, blah, blah, blah. Is there any way that we can get that information out to the public when that it comes in? Because I really feel sorry for, when we get
People
crowds
that I
of
know.
20 people here,
Yeah.
And they just go away.
I mean, we post an updated agenda with requests to postpone, which is about as much as we can do.
We put a notice, like when people sign in, or the people don't sign into our meetings, right?
They do if they're going to speak, and we do put agendas out.
Right, but to the point, that's very late in the process, they're already here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the updated agenda, I guess, would be the smart thing to look at if you
That-
were showing
yeah,
up
but-
with a crowd.
Right.
It just seems to happen, like it did with the, never mind. It did in some examples that I could think of.
Yeah, I mean,
Postponed a lot.
Sometimes it's so last minute that.
like the day before, so, I mean, we can and do post an updated agenda when we get those.
So by saying that the applicant can request to postpone,
So,
it's 48, sorry, may I continue my thought? With 48 hours notice, I noticed the 48 hours is bracketed. Does this mean that the applicant is required to submit the request with at least 48 hours notice? Because that would kind of solve the problem for the general public who wants to make comments and appear? Or if an applicant said 10 minutes before the meeting that we're going to postpone, they still have the right to do that?
I mean, certainly it would be great if we could get 48 hours notice. It's not always the case, the one tonight came in yesterday. And it just depends on what we see for the reason for it. And, tonight it sounded like it was a personal emergency matter, so, we would request 48 hours. And I think this was getting at when staff can approve a postponement versus the board must take it up and approve a postponement.
I see.
yeah, so this goes back to my comment, which is it irritates me that we have to vote on all these postponements when we really don't have an actual alternative, because we generally don't have like the information in front of us. What if we said, no, we deny the postponement, and then we're looking around like we don't have the information in front of us to do anything with the application at that point in time? So I like the 48 hours. That gives staff the opportunity to make the correction. Then we as a board don't have to vote on it. If it's within the 48 hours, hey, things still do happen. Personal emergencies, whatever the case may be. But then the board would have if we thought that the applicant was, no kidding, like pushing the rules, and they were just doing it because they suddenly realized they were in trouble with the neighborhood or whatever the case may be, we could say, know what? We're going forward with it. We are not granting your postponement, and we will consider the information that we have before us in our packet, and that's how we're going to make our decision, right? It just gives us a realistic option at that point in time, rather than a pro forma, oh, we postpone because we really have no other real alternative. Oh.
Yes.
So I'm all for this, but I just wonder about the 48 hours. I mean, most of our meetings are on Tuesday nights. 48 hours in advance is Sunday evening. Would it be better for the staff if it was 2 business days?
The
or
Friday
Friday
before.
before
Yeah,
the meeting
that's
or
probably
something?
better.
The Friday.
Yeah,
that
Friday
makes-
before.
Right.
Friday noon.
48 hours sounds like a good name of a television.
2 business days is a good way to
think
phrase
it's
it, though,
been
because
used.
sometimes we meet on a Wednesday or
Twice as good.
odd day.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
2 business days is good.
I agree.
And then there was a question of whether it should be may or shall.
Oh my God, I've
Shall.
had that over and over again.
Shall.
Shall. Right?
I have a military
If
background.
it's going to be a
Shall.
rule, it's going to be a rule.
Shall's directed, may is
Suggested.
correct.
Shall it is.
I don't like shall.
You don't like shall because you don't think it should be.
We don't get
Shall is
discretion.
have to, may is may.
No, I understand the difference, but why should they have discretion?
City staff?
Well,
No,
this
I
is
mean,
saying,
it-
this would say city staff shall postpone consideration of the application, so I guess that's the question.
Why wouldn't we? want
Yes,
you to
right, why wouldn't we?
postpone?
Yeah.
Have we ever had a case where we denied a request to postpone?
No, because normally we don't have a realistic option to denial, but
I mean, I don't really care if it's may or shall, except that
I mean,
shall, if the rule is we need it, yeah, go ahead.
I'm fine with May. I mean, I'm willing to give city staff a little bit of discretion there. I think they'll do the right thing, in the sense that 99% of the time, they're probably gonna just do the postponement. There may be one exception where they talk to the legal department and say, you know what, we're not gonna accept this for whatever reason, and
Worried about.
it needs to come
Yeah.
before the board. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yes,
Moving on.
no,
Yeah, I was going to complicate it by saying, what if it's repeated postponements? So maybe
Yeah.
May is better.
Make me.
yeah, okay, we can keep it. Yes, go ahead.
So while we're on page 8, I just wanted to ask Trevor about number 7. Are you comfortable with that wording, that we don't necessarily have to solicit comment to decide whether or not we have jurisdiction, but we can? Do you see any legal problems with that?
I mean, it certainly hasn't, you're not obligated to. There's no law or rule that says you have to. I mean, I could certainly see someone making a, due process claim, for example. But given that it's a Fisher v. Dover issue, the review upon appeal is de novo. So they would have the full right to make the argument before the court. I mean, if you wanted to make it mandatory, you certainly could. There's nothing wrong with that. But I would think it's up to the board.
No, I just wanted to see if you saw any legal, okay.
Anything else?
Appreciate all the hard work by staff to kind of coalesce our ramblings into something that.
Something like something.
And then we'll have another, yes,
No,
Tom, no?
new subject.
Oh,
I'll wait till this is done.
Oh, okay.
okay, go ahead.
So I'm just curious, the city council passed a volunteer training standards and manual in the January meeting. Do you know when that's going to be implemented?
Not sure that I do, but I will look into it.
Thank you, I forgot to
So,
mention.
do we have new requirements for training? I didn't know anything about that.
Know anything about
I assiduously avoid city council meetings.
I know there's a rollout. There's a rollout that's going to be underway of the new volunteer manual, but I've not particularly.
Okay,
I think it includes, primarily what it includes is an overview of ethics requirements.
Yeah.
Things like that. And I think there's some stuff in it that I'm not sure we really need, but it's on Robert's rules. But the big thing is on the ethics standards up by the city to make sure everybody's trained on what they are.
Yeah, I think it's more targeted to, people on committees around the city. I mean, obviously, the land use boards have a different level of
right.
scrutiny, I think, as you're getting to, so.
And we have in the past had our own trainings on this, so. But now I guess it's institutional. Okay.
I didn't see that we actually decided to have an annual meeting.
I think that's just what we call the meeting that we elect the officers.
I think so,
Now it's
right?
the
Isn't that
annual
what we-
meeting.
Yeah, and it might be a good time again to collect those. The hat's on, I guess it's time to.
I have one more thing.
Well,
Pass out.
that's the penultimate sign. The ultimate is when I start ripping up my papers.
I just wanted to note that City Council passed third reading on changes to the zoning ordinance last night on Article 5 and Article 8. I'll just pass out what those changes were, and we will get you updated link to the updated zoning ordinance.
Small sheds wherever you want them.
Okay.
Including the condo association?
I think we are at the point where we could entertain
Including
a
firewood
motion
sheds?
to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I have something I'd like to bring up.
Yes,
Don't you dare.
Good, because Tom was going to throw something at you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are.